Joel Bartlett weather and Dan Lovett sports. This is Channel 7 News at 11.
Human rights activist Harry Wu says First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton should not attend the United Nations Women's Conference in China. Wu says Mrs. Clinton's trip is a mistake and that if she does go, the First Lady should openly denounce China's treatment of dissidents while she's there. Wu was released by Chinese authorities earlier this week after they convicted him of spying and sentenced him to 15 years in prison.
And now, live, the Bay Area's #1 and most respected news source, the KTVU News Team, with the 5 o'clock news.
In the South Bay today, human rights activist Harry Wu outlined what he thinks should be on the agenda for the U.S.-China summit. Wu was expelled from China last week after being sentenced to a 15-year prison term. Today, he thanked his supporters but told them there is more work to do. Dolores Canizaro reports.
Harry Wu got a hero's welcome this morning at the Chinese American Cultural Center in Sunnyvale. He was greeted by friends, fellow Chinese Americans, and human rights activists who had worked to free him during his 66-day imprisonment in China.
On behalf of all those activists, I want to say, welcome back to the home front.
When you lost your liberty and regain the liberty, it's a very good feeling.
This past June, Wu was arrested while trying to enter China to document human rights abuses in its prison labor camps. Last Thursday, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for spying, but China then deported him back to the U.S. Since then, the White House has announced that First Lady Hillary Clinton will attend a women's conference in Beijing next month, and President Clinton will likely host a summit with China's president this fall.
I hope Clinton put the Chinese human rights violation on the top agenda in this meeting.
Wu's wife, Ching Li, said she was concerned about how Mrs. Clinton's visit will be seen by the world.
She cannot escape the fact that her presence confers greater prestige upon China.
Since his release, Harry Wu has had a very busy schedule. Today alone, he is talking with NPR, the BBC, Time, and Newsweek. But he felt it important to come here to tell his own Chinese community his story.
Thank you for coming home.
Before emigrating to the U.S., Harry Wu spent 19 years in a Chinese prison labor camp. This man spent 20.
He said, I'm so happy to see him return home safely because the democracy movement in China needs an individual like him.
I was jubilant, and it brought tears to my eyes because I didn't think I would see him again.
Harry Wu says there's still much more to learn about China's prison labor camps.
We don't know how many camps today in China exist. How many prisons over there? What is the living condition? What is the forced labor condition? And this human rights situation in the jail system, we don't know yet.
But he says he's not sure if he'll ever return to China. A 15-year prison sentence awaits him if he does. Still, China is his homeland, and he says he has the right to go back, although he admits he may not return as long as the communists are in power. In Sunnyvale, Dolores Canizaro for the 5 o'clock news.
This is News Center 4 at 5, your 24-hour news service.
I hope Clinton put the Chinese human rights violation on the top agenda in this meeting.
Human rights activist Harry Wu taking a stand on a possible upcoming presidential summit between the U.S. and China. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Catherine Heenan. American and Chinese leaders are trying to mend their recently troubled relationship. They are making plans for a possible fall summit. The fact that China recently freed activist Harry Wu may have been a very big factor in this. As for Wu, he got a hero's welcome at a Sunnyvale gathering today, but says that he is finding the spotlight uncomfortable. News Center 4's Isabel Duran reports.
Constantly surrounded by press, Harry Wu has had little chance to catch his breath. It's his third day home after 2 months in Chinese detention. Today, he drew an admiring crowd for his first public outing at the Sunnyvale Chinese Culture Center.
When you lost your liberty and regain the liberty, it's a very good feeling. I really enjoy it. I become free again.
What he does not enjoy is the hero worship generated by his case. He says instead, the true heroes are locked up in Chinese prisons.
I prefer call Wei Jingsheng is a hero.
He feels more like a pawn than a hero. Wu believes China made a deal with the U.S. to release him so that First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton could attend the UN-sponsored women's conference in Beijing. Wu fears her presence would be used as a propaganda tool to the benefit of Beijing, even though the White House says she won't be meeting with Chinese officials.
If Mrs. Clinton attend the meeting, bravely, frankly, expresses her opinion, condemn the Chinese Gulag, condemn the human rights violation, why not? Let's go. I doubt you want to do it.
On CBS this morning, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who reportedly took a message to the Chinese president from Mr. Clinton, put another spin on Wu's release.
The Chinese put forward this gesture in releasing Harry Wu. There was no quid pro quo.
More likely, it was a conciliatory move. Wu's arrest and the Taiwanese president's May visit to America had badly soured U.S.-Sino relations. This morning, it was announced China and the U.S. will aim for an October summit in Washington. Harry Wu's reaction.
I hope Clinton put the Chinese human rights violation on the top agenda in this meeting.
Isabel Duran, News Center 4.
Harry Wu is not making any big plans right now. He says he needs to settle down and pay some bills before considering his next step. Besides that, Chinese officials have made it clear he will go right back to prison if he comes back.
From KPIX Channel 5, this is Eyewitness News at 6.
Thank you. Thank you.
Former political prisoner Harry Wu holds his first official news conference today, 3 days after being released from a Chinese prison. Good evening, I'm Barbara Rogers.
And I'm Hank Plant.
Harry Wu was held as a prisoner in China for 66 days, days when he did not know if he would ever be able to come back home. But today he told reporters and supporters that he has not been defeated by his ordeal and that he does not rule out going back to China again. Arthur Cribbs has our report.
It's just my dream. I never expect I can come back. And so that's why I'm so happy.
Human rights activist Harry Wu received a hero's welcome when he arrived at the Chinese American Culture Center in Sunnyvale. 3 days ago, Wu returned home after he was convicted of being a spy and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Chinese authorities expelled Wu and sent him back to the United States. Wu says his darkest days came when guards took away his wedding band.
This is the only thing I would consider even to get on my knees to request that they allow me to wear my wedding ring.
Wu calls First Lady Hillary Clinton's decision to attend the women's conference in Beijing a victory for the Chinese government.
But if Mrs. Clinton attend the meeting, bravely, frankly, expresses her opinion, condemn the Chinese Gulag, condemn the human rights violation, why not? Let's go.
Before becoming a citizen of the United States, Wu spent 19 years in China's labor camps. He accuses the Chinese government of taking organs from executed prisoners and using them for medical tests and transplants. He says the government also runs forced labor camps. He says he felt more like a president and not a prisoner because he is an American citizen and had up to 60 police guards assigned to him. He says he ate the same food as the guards and was kept in a villa along a river. Although convicted and expelled, Wu says he wants to go back to China again.
China is my motherland. I born over there. I raised over there. And that piece of land is full of my blood and tears. I have the right to go back. Today, the communist government have the power to restrict me to go back, but how long they can last.
My suggestion to them is stop doing all that. Just abolish the forced labor camp system, so then Harry has no place to go back to.
Harry Wu told his friends he adopted a philosophy while in China. You can destroy me, he says, but you can't defeat me. In Sunnyvale, Arthur Cribbs, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
Meanwhile, fear of China's government doesn't stop at that country's borders. In fact, it reaches across the Pacific to San Francisco. As Wendy Hanamura reports, this begins to explain the silence in the Chinese community about Harry Wu's release.
In Chinatown, the news made barely a ripple. The reaction? Silence.
Here in Chinatown, what's the feeling about Harry Wu?
It's a split, but I think more so in Chinatown, they're not going to talk all that much about it. When Harry Wu was arrested, you don't see the Chinese community coming out to protest or rally.
But listen carefully to the silence, and you'll hear a message.
What do you think about the release of Harry Wu today?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet. We don't know.
佢有啲問題。
我哋聽日仲返去入邊大陸嘅講嘅。Okay.
What does he say?
Is that they still want to go back to China sometimes, so they don't want to talk about the situation.
我哋有家人喺 China.
And then they also have relatives in China.
They are afraid, and Wu's 15-year sentence, televised for all the world to see, did little to dispel the feeling that China's arms are long. Wu's release paves the way for Hillary Clinton to attend the Beijing Women's Conference and patches up our relationship with Beijing, rocky ever since Tiananmen Square, openly hostile after the Clinton administration allowed the president of Taiwan to visit. You see, America recognizes only one China, mainland China. In Chinatown, newspapers echoed the China-Taiwan split.
And Taiwan's newspapers say that he is a hero because he fight for the human rights. But here, the newspapers say that he's a spy, that he should not interfere the China's
policy.
Yeah.
And for a few, Harry Wu is a hero, a symbol as powerful as Tiananmen's goddess of democracy.
Well, I think he's a great activist. I believe that what he's done is correct. I believe that the system back there is unfair.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, because the China should respect the human rights that every Chinese wants.
This is Wendy Hanamura reporting.
Harry Wu's darkest hour during more than 2 months of captivity came when Chinese prison officials took away his wedding ring. The Chinese hoped it would force Wu to confess to spying. It was the only time he got on his knees and begged. Speaking in Sunnyvale today, the Chinese activist is still recovering from his captivity, but he has not ruled out any future missions to China.
My parents, my former inmates, my fellow countrymen is over there. I have the right to go back. Today, the communist government have the power to restrict me to go back. But how long they can last?
Wu, who is a Hoover Institution scholar, went to China to expose China's labor camps. He is sure his release came only because he is an American.
KGO-TV Channel 7, #1 in Northern California. Now Carolyn Tyler, Dan Noyes, Joel Bartlett Weather, and Dan Lovett Sports. This is Channel 7 News at 6.
I never expect I can come back, and so that's why I'm so happy.
Bay Area human rights activist Harry Wu celebrates his third day back in a free country by thanking his supporters and by urging First Lady Hillary Clinton to skip next month's UN Women's Conference in Beijing.
Wu says he is finally at home and at ease and anxious to talk about his captivity in China. He says the darkest hour during those 9 weeks came when government officials who were pushing him to confess to spying took away his wedding ring. Channel 7's Ed Leslie has our report.
This was Wu's first chance to thank fellow Americans and others who supported him during his 66 days in custody in China. This on the eve of First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton's planned trip to China in September to discuss international women's issues. Wu today said he disapproves.
If Chinese government release me as a condition for Mr. Clinton to attend the Women's Conference in Beijing, that means Mrs. Clinton's presence in Beijing is a benefit for communists.
Wu, a Milpitas resident, went to China, his homeland, to document what he says are atrocities in the prison system there, including forced labor and selling the organs of prisoners who either died behind bars or were killed in prison. His supporters today said the arrest and imprisonment in China were based upon lies.
Harry wants to set the record straight because the Chinese propaganda machine has been blasted at him for the last few days. In a way, it is an honor because a vast nation like that will focus its energy on one person only. But unfortunately, they're being lying all the way through even today.
Wu says he may return to China.
China is my motherland. I born over there. I raised over there. In that piece of land, is full of my blood and tears. My parents, my former inmates, my fellow countrymen is over there. I have the right to go back.
Mr. Wu's plans now include engaging in an international speaking tour, beginning in Washington, D.C., moving on to Europe, but not necessarily including China. In Sunnyvale, Ed Leslie, Channel 7 News.
Now, Harry Wu's release may help ease some tensions in the strained relationship between the U.S. and China. Today, American and Chinese officials agreed to a possible summit between the two countries' presidents this fall. And as you know, First Lady Hillary Clinton has now agreed to attend that UN Women's Conference in Beijing. Her decision is controversial in light of China's human rights record. Republican Representative Susan Molinari says the First Lady should not go. Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein disagrees.
There's no doubt that China is going to use the visit of Mrs. Clinton as a propaganda tool to tell the people in China that all must be okay. The First Lady of the United States is actually coming here to participate in a conference. How bad can we be?
If we're really interested in human rights, what as a nation we ought to do is help the Chinese in the evolution of an independent judicial system and one that has due process of law. The Chinese have indicated an interest in pursuing that course, and I believe that that's really what's going to make the difference.
Besides human rights, the U.S. and China are divided on other issues, including trade.
Now, Bay TV News at 7.
A proudly unrepentant Harry Wu met the public and the press for the first time since his release from China today. The Chinese-American human rights activist thanked the public for its support during his ordeal, but he had some sharp words for the governments of China and the United States. Ira Eisenberg has the story.
Harry Wu arrived at the Chinese-American Culture Center in Sunnyvale this morning to a hero's welcome. Some 200 people, including a small army of reporters, showed up to greet the internationally known rights activist released last week after more than 2 months in a Beijing prison. Wu was introduced by Rena Margolis of Amnesty International, who reminded the crowd that it was worldwide pressure from human rights activists that led to his release.
Harry, on behalf of all those activists, I want to say welcome back to the home front.
Well, back to home is a very good feeling. When you lost your liberty and regain the liberty, it is a very good feeling.
Harry Wu came here today not to praise the Chinese officials who recently granted him his freedom, but to denounce them. He even had some not-so-veiled criticisms of President Clinton and the First Lady.
If Chinese government release me as a condition for Mr. Clinton to attend the Women's Conference in Beijing, that means Mrs. Clinton's presence in Beijing is a benefit for communists.
China has arrested my husband, an American citizen, and you are the First Lady of, you are the American First Lady, and she cannot escape the fact that her presence confers greater prestige upon China.
Ching Li also said she supported her husband's dangerous human rights crusade forever. But Wu said he had no immediate plans to return to China. In the South Bay, Ira Eisenberg, Bay TV.
While he's not ready to risk another trip to the land of his birth just yet, Wu said other political dissidents remain in China's prisons and the struggle for human rights will continue.